Hello, everybody. Welcome to 4-4. This is the 8th edition. Super excited to still have your support and keep this thing going. Super excited to finally be having a conversation about abstraction today. This is one of the conversations that I've been really wanting to have and inviting Black women who are painting in that tradition, especially to have a conversation. It's so weird. Like, I remember a few months ago, I asked someone, can you name me your 5 favorite Black women abstractionists? And like half the people they said were like not people who were alive anymore. And I was just like, I feel like we can do better than this. So I really wanted to have this conversation today to make sure that we are really centering those voices and exploring their work in the ways that they deserve. I'm gonna keep rambling for a few more seconds till we have a few more people. Hello, everyone. Also, housekeeping, love of a lively chat. We've been doing an incredible job of that thus far. Also, I'm gonna make sure that you all remember all panelists and attendees is who you want to send to, because I think last week we had an issue where people were only messaging panelists, so everyone wasn't seeing everything that everyone was saying. So we want to make sure we're doing that. Also, we love screenshots. So if you can take screenshots through the course of the conversation, that'd be incredible. We love that. It kind of prolongs the life of our conversations, and it's like a nice, thing to come across after the conversation as well. Again, thank you to everyone who has consistently joined us every week. This is the 8th one of these that we're doing. And I'm so excited to have you back again. So who do we have with us today? We have Aimée Everett, Adrienne Gaither, and Shani Jamila. All of them work in abstraction, but they all are working in other disciplines as well. So I'm super excited to have them speak with you about what they're doing. Oh, amazing. We have a first-time attendee. Welcome, Shanika. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. So we're at about 36 people. You think I should wait or you think I should get going? Tell me in the chat. No responses in the chat. I guess I'll just keep it going. It's only been 2 minutes. Also, what is 4-4 for those who are just joining for the first time? 4-4 is an ongoing conversation series where I, Nyama Sophia Sandy, invite 3 women in our space in arts and culture around the globe, particularly Black diasporic people, to speak about their work, speak about what they're thinking through, think about the lineages that they're drawing from. That's a shout out to you, Shani. We can come to that. As well as just what they want to make for the future. And it's really exciting. I think I started this just because I was thinking about who I wasn't seeing in the myriad of IG live conversations and the 10,000 Zooms that everybody was doing. I was just like, where the Black women at though? Where they at? Can we see them? I know they did. Where they at? So I thought, why don't I actually just do that? This could be my contribution in this difficult time. So here we are. And I thank you all for continuing to join week by week. Alba! Thanks for coming, Alba. Hi, Natasha. All right, let's get into it. So the first person that we have joining us is Aimée. I said it right? Yes. Aimée Everett. Aimée Everett's work is interested in exploring and asking the question, what lingers in the silences we hold between each spoken word? She examines these silences, the ones that have been handed down generation after generation, and the ones acquired as we maneuver through the world by employing expressive minimalism. Everett is originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, and lives and works in Austin, Texas. Everett's work has been showcased in galleries in New York, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Dallas, and Austin. I'm super excited to have her here. I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself. And there you go. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. So with my work, I'm always interested in human connection and human interaction and how we talk to each other. And basically our reasoning for communicating is to express emotions and how we feel, be it good or bad. And there are often many times where we misinterpret how someone communicates. And I always say that words are just abstractions that we've all agreed upon, but for each of us, they hold different weight. And so in between those abstractions, which are words that we agreed upon, what is left over? And so in my paintings, I try to pick up those remnants of emotions and try to express them through line, color, texture. And that is, I'm gonna show you a few photos. So in this piece is titled The Battle Ensues. So when you tell someone the battle ensues, like, what does that look like? And so with one half of the picture, there's this rough metal with these lines going across, and on the other side, there's this kind of uniform motion. And so for me, it's like that battle of, like, when you first leave home and you are battling with what you were taught as of what you're seeing in the world. So you're trying to make right between those two worlds. And so I wanted a visual representation of what it's like to go against what you've been taught as to what you actually feel is right. And so in a lot of my work, I try to use line as the representation of thought. And so I go back to Morse code with that. So I'll have a complete thought and then a stop and then a complete thought, because that's also a form of communication. It's not words, but it's also another way that we've created to communicate with each other. And so in this picture, this one's called Should Have Said No. And early on in my work, so these are earlier works, I tried to include words because a lot of the times I'll sketch paintings with words. My sketchbook is just filled with words because I want to take those and turn them into a visual scene, a visual composition. So I'll take those words and I'll just ruminate and meditate on them for a while. So in this piece, I just wrote over and over again, should have said no. And this is a representation of that time when you overburden yourself and you say yes to something that you know that you don't have time for, that you should have said no for. So one side represents with the swirls, like your thoughts of like, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to balance this with everything else? And then the other side of the canvas represents that order in which you present to everyone else. Like, yeah, I can do that. Sure, I can take that on, when you know that you don't want to, you can't, but you feel obligated to. This piece is titled, so this is the first piece that I started with on round canvas. And I use a lot of round pieces because I feel like a lot of these thoughts replay themselves. So with the lines representing thought, they kind of go back into the canvas, because even though you've gone through a thought and maybe you think you've tackled it or you've conquered that thought, they always come back, because I think our thought processes are still part of us and ingrained in us. And it's a constant battle of what's right, what's wrong, should I continue with this thought or suppressing that thought? This piece is called Hindsight. So everything's in order, because when you look back on a situation, you know what you should have done, what you shouldn't have done, what you should have said. And so I wanted to represent that order of looking back. And it also represents like an eye, because the eye is circle. So I try to put all of that sort of imagery into the pieces. The words cut off, but this is called Lay Me Down But Never Pick Me Up. I was listening to a talk by Eartha Kitt, and she was explaining her relationships with men. And she was saying how men would always want to lay her down and never pick her up. So I wanted to create this visual imagery of lines, the lines going downward, and this just covering at the top. And this is what I saw when I heard her say that. So when people speak to me, so if you see me talking to you and I'm like going off, looking off, and I'm daydreaming, it's because I'm thinking of what you're saying in a visual sense. So when she said that, this is the image that I saw. And this piece is called Keeping Erosion at Bay. I kept the wood grain in this piece because wood grain also talks and speaks on its own. So I wanted to keep that within my composition. This piece represents keeping those bad thoughts at bay again. And so I use the erosion or the rust to represent those thoughts that we know don't serve us, and the lines as us, constantly trying to push those thoughts away. And this piece is called Disarmament. I wanted it to represent armor. A lot of my work, I look at medieval and Byzantine art. And so I wanted to take the gold, because in Byzantine art, it's just riddled with disguised symbolism, which is also one of my inspirations. And I wanted to take the gold and the copper to represent that heavenly place that they always talk about or represent in Byzantine art as the armor that we create for ourselves to protect ourselves from other people or whatever the case may be. And I wanted those two lines to represent the melting away of the armor when we don't need it. So that is why it is titled Disarmament. So after I did you notice in the pieces, I started to go further towards minimalism with the lines. And in this piece, I wanted to represent a cleansing, like sort of when you go into yourself and you start thinking about these thoughts and you try to clean out the things that you know don't serve you. And I wanted to have a deconstructed form of a wave. And so this piece is just simply form and color with a resin overlay. Mark Rothko is one of my biggest inspirations. I read a lot of his writings, and in his theory on art making, he made a lot of comments about how, you know, the artist is always questioned, but no one ever questions the plumber, no one ever questions the doctor. They just take the advice and don't say anything. And so, you know, the artist is searching for truth. And so one of his quotes was, the light when demonstrating the truth is the brightest. And so I wanted to have this monochromatic field, but have these shoots of light going out when, you know, we've all had those times where it's really hard to tell the truth and we're just anxious about it, but we know that that little voice of truth is way louder than any lie, because the lie is very sweet in the beginning, but in the end it's bitter. But the truth is very bitter in the beginning, but at the end, it's the best thing that you could ever have. So I wanted to kind of show that in this piece. In this piece, this is one of my favorites. I think I owned this piece for 3 months before it was gone. I kind of get attached to my pieces. They're kind of like children. So when they leave, I mourn them. But anyways, this piece is titled, Even When the Sun Burns Out, You'll Find I'm Gonna Love You. And it's from a song by Matt Corby. And so when I heard that, I'm like, that's a really strong emotion, telling someone that when the sun burns out, you're gonna find that I'm still gonna love you. So I wanted these rays of light to come out of this darkness. And this is what I saw when I heard that lyric. This is the first piece that I created during lockdown, and I was searching for just some kind of balance, some kind of calm, some kind of serenity. And this is what I saw, just like out in the distance, water, and another like deconstructed wave at the bottom. This piece was actually created as a commission. So the person who wanted it, he said he just wanted something tranquil. And for me, the sky is always offering me tranquility. And so I wanted to show like a converging of skies. So like sunset, sunrise. And so I wanted to create that blending of the two. And then the circle in the middle, it doesn't completely close because I don't believe, I haven't found it, true tranquility exists. And so you always kind of get there, but you never kind of meet that true tranquility. So I wanted that circle to be open to represent that. And this is part of my new series. So right now I'm working on memories and how memories play into our day-to-day musings, how we go about dealing with people, dealing with things based upon memory. And I think sometimes we over-remember memories because they're just illusions. And every time we remember them, we rewrite them as something new. And so the circle of copper isn't closed again because it represents an end to over-remembrance. And the red bars on the side represent being triggered. So it's that triggering memory that you want to maybe reassess. Why is it triggering? And offer it some sort of reverence. So therefore it doesn't keep showing up in your life. So that's what my new series is. It's called Paying Reverence to the Altar of Memories. I believe that all of our emotions kind of serve as an altar, and sometimes we spend too much time at one and we don't pay attention to the other altars. So they keep showing up in our lives until we give them that attention. It's like that inner child almost. So this is some of my inspirations. This is Maxfield Parrish. He was an illustrator, and his use of color and chiaroscuro and the lightness, I wanted to portray that in my works as well. because even though it's abstract, you can still have these glowing moments of light in the painting. Adrienne Piper is amazing. The way that she just throws herself in her work, the way that she switches up a genre when she needs to say something else, and the way that she learns how to communicate, that is what I'm searching for in my work. So I look back to her often to kind of get me back on track, or to understand human connection and how to communicate. Hagia Sophia, once again, Byzantine art, and the use of circles, the use of disguised symbolism, and gold leafing. Alma Thomas, if you don't know Alma Thomas, you guys should really become very familiar with her. She's a Black abstractionist as well. She doesn't just do abstraction work, which is amazing about most abstraction artists. If people don't know, we do abstraction because we want to. We do abstraction because we can. And I think in a way, abstraction is a tad bit harder because people just assume that you're just throwing figures on a canvas or whatever the support may be, but they don't know that it's actual intention behind it. So I'm glad you all are tuning in today. Betty Saar. Right now, my work is going into memories, which I think also offer a sort of mythology. So looking at her work and how she goes into psychology, which is kind of what I'm doing, she's a big inspiration for me as well. And that is it.
Uh-oh.
Trying to get out of that. There we go.
Okay. Amy, have you stopped sharing your screen?
Give me 1 second.
I don't see anything. Okay. Well, okay. I don't know if anyone can see me. There we go. Thank you so much, Amy. That was amazing. Amazing, amazing. I loved hearing about your influences in particular. I love that Byzantine art is part of what you're thinking about. It's incredible. So next we will hear from Adrienne Gaither. I'm super excited to have Adrienne with us today. Adrienne is a DC-based painter whose work explores and critiques the ownership and politics of geometric abstraction, which I think is actually such a beautiful segue considering Aimé's last comments. Themes examined in Gaither's work are race, familial ties, emotional health, and class. Her work leverages shape, color, and composition, encoding a multitude of personal observations and messages to create a visual language that serves as a personal form of resistance and catharsis. Gaither has received her MFA at Howard University. I'm sorry, I have to do this. If you know, you know. HU. Okay. And is a recipient of the DC Commission of the Arts and Humanities Artist Fellowship in 2018 through 2020. Her work is featured in Black Post-Blackness, the Black Arts Movement and the 21st Century by Margot Natalie Crawford. Gaither is exhibited at Cuchifrutos Gallery, Transformer DC, the Washington Project for the Arts, Katzen Gallery, National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center in Ohio, and Prism Art Fair, as well as Art on the Vine and Martha's Vineyard. She has permanent installations at the DC West End Public Library, the Smithsonian Anacostia Museum, as well as in various private collections. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself and take it away.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Naima, for having me. My name is Adrienne Gaither. I think I'm just going to start with introducing myself, and then I'll get into some of my works. But the driver in my work, for the most part, or some of the drivers in me doing geometric abstraction is, you know, what would Black art look like if there were more abstract painters that I could read about or learn from. So who's missing? And also just being like a queer Black woman, holding that space doing geometric abstraction, which is kind of propped up to be this white man's game. So I'm gonna share my screen with you guys, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so kind of similar to Aimée, I've started my work with like some sort of code. I have a background in graphic design, so the thing that I felt, I had to figure out how I could take a risk going into a new medium like painting, but still find some comfort in finding my way through the work. So what I did was abstracted the alphabet as like this key that I could use to create compositions so that I could talk about what I wanted to talk about in a very rudimentary way. Like I said, I want to use geometric abstraction. I could do it, I could make work a lot of different ways, but this is what I'm choosing to do. These images here are just a few images of like how I use this key as a jumping point for me to make work. Let me see. All right. And like moving through, just figuring out how to deal with shape and color, and using that code. I got to a place where I wanted to abandon that because I had gotten comfortable with just using color and shape to communicate my ideas, to explore what it is I wanted to talk about, and to like bring concept to my work, like conceptualize ideas through geometric abstraction rather than just making non-figurative work. So these pieces I'm showing now are a series titled I Don't See Color. I wanted to kind of play around with this idea of, us living in a post-racial society, which is not true. And how color blindness was a cop-out or a catchphrase for people to use when they wanted to, I guess, put on airs of being racially equitable or for racial justice. They just say, oh, I'm colorblind, I don't really see you. So I wanted to explore, like skin tones and physical color blindness. That's a real visual impairment, and explore color through that. And what I learned through this series was that it takes a lot of brown to make white. And I don't know, it was just fun to push like a narrative about skin tones and color blindness in this way. And from there, I kind of moved into this place where I wanted to use geometric abstraction to get more personal and dig into my own, into myself, more so than what my observations are. Like, how can I use this to talk about me or explore myself? And with that, I gave myself the challenge of like just coming up with different compositions or using certain colors to lead exploration. So for these two pieces, they're a part of a series titled How I Got Over, which paralleled like trauma recovery with painting, as both are time-based experiences. So the work to the, I guess it's the left to everybody, depending on the screen. But so the work to the left is through the phase of remembrance and mourning through trauma recovery. So this is actually an instance. The image I'm showing here is when I tore my Achilles heel. That was an incredible experience to have because I really could not walk. And I wasn't able to do the things that, I mean, we all know how essential walking is. if we can walk rather. So to not have that faculty was painful, and this is how I visualized my Achilles heel snapping, essentially, because I was playing basketball. I was playing basketball and just like cross someone over, but cross myself over. Um, and it was painful. I thought I had just like sprained my ankle, but that's not what it was like. And then just going through the process of like getting surgery and being on the road to recovery for that, I had to accept that, you know, my body wasn't gonna be the same that it was. And the piece to the right is about stonewalling, which is in trauma recovery, it's safety, and this is like a space of safety and stability. And I think, you know, when you're giving yourself time to heal, you can put up defenses. And so this piece is titled Stonewalling because, you know, for me, that's my worst defense, but it's the one that I know that I'm kind of good at. I wanted to have that in my, you know, explore that as a space of safety, because sometimes I go there because I think it's safe, but it's not always safe. And this is a more recent piece. This is piece called In and Out. Like I said, I like to use shape and color, but sometimes I'll use colors to drive the composition in terms of what is it that I want to explore. Last year, it was a really rough year for me, mentally and emotionally. And I was trying to find my way through gray space because I think, you know, well, I latch onto my zodiac. I'm a Scorpio. So I find myself to be very emotional. And I mean, I'm not all the things, but, you know, there's some things you just identify with and you run with. And so I don't think I have much of I'm not a gray space type of person, like it is or it isn't. And I wanted to challenge myself with using gray as like this nebulous space. And I found that through using gray, like it still has boundaries in the way that I work. And so gray is still a space of boundaries, even though I think sometimes I find people using, you know, I'm okay with the gray to be a middle space. It's not really a middle space. You still have to define gray within those middle areas. And this is currently how I'm working and what I'm working on. I got a commission here in DC to do a public art at a high school, and I wanted to kind of take shapes and push them off the wall. I didn't want them to be so flat anymore, as I think sometimes that flatness in my work takes away some forms of humanity. Like it can get very, I can't find the word right now. But I think sometimes my humanity can get lost in painting so flat and hard edge and doing geometric abstraction. There's a flatness that happens that I like sometimes, but I don't always enjoy. And I think in this work, I wanted to move out of that flatness and see how I could build compositions three-dimensionally. These works will eventually just be floating and affixed to the wall as its own composition. And I've been working on this, I would say, since December. It's like 60 pieces total. And the title of this is Debris, because I was thinking about the world ending and like how there be just, it's going to be a mess, or there's going to be things coming from all angles, which they are at this moment. So this is fitting, but it's playful. And I think throughout all of my work, I try to bring this level of play to like the colors, because I want it to be inviting, but I also want to have a real conversation. And I think that playfulness allows me to have these really interesting conversations, without it feeling so serious. And that's it for that. 1 second. So, as far as my influences with my work, Aaron Douglas was somebody that I found to be very exciting to learn about and read about, as he was a graphic designer and Black and a muralist. And I find sometimes that I want to find ways to bring or put all of my skills in one pot, and public art does that for me sometimes. I also really enjoy Phil Rath-Hines. He's an abstract painter. He's here in DC. I don't think a lot of people know him, and you know, I think that's it hurts that a lot of people don't know him. It hurts that a lot of people don't know Mavis Boucher. I would say she's one of my heroes as far as geometric abstraction. But when I found her in the books, or just, you know, her very minimal images, I was excited because I didn't feel alone. And Romare Bearden is a great influence as well because, well, one, you know, when I read about Romare Bearden before I saw his picture, so I was really excited about him. But then when I saw his picture, I was like, this dude, I thought he was Black, but he's just, you know, very, very light skinned. And I was like, he lied to me, you know? So to see his abstract work and to see, you know, the trajectory of his career from, I mean, he was still working abstractly with his figures, but he had to put the figure in there in order to get somewhere, and to get the right recognition he deserved. And, you know, that hurts that he had to make that kind of pivot to be considered somebody that needs to be written in history. I love Alma Thomas, and I love Sam Gilliam too. His work's exciting. When I saw that he did Hard Edge, you know, I didn't feel alone either. And I mean, now he's like draping canvas. So I think that it just, having, you know, so many Black abstract painters be recognized now, I'm happy about that. I do still wonder, you know, who else are we leaving behind, or who else has been left behind? Because the people who are now getting, you know, their accolades, look at how long it took them to get the credit and recognition that they've been doing the work. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Wow. You kind of like just blew my mind a bit. Mad quotables. That was really great. Thank you. And next, we have Shani Jamila. Shani Jamila is a Brooklyn-based conceptual artist whose work explores identity, ancestry, and the importance of place. She utilizes her family's genealogical records as a primary source, and her travels to nearly 50 countries throughout the Americas, Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Caribbean also deeply inform her practice. Jamila is a 2020 to 2021 Artist Fellow in Fine Arts and Painting at the National Arts Club. She's been awarded fellowships and residencies to support her work from Mass MoCA, TED, the Aspen Institute, the Ace Hotel, and the J. William Fulbright Foundation. Her podcast, Lineage, features intimate, in-depth interviews about the idea of home with some of New York City's most imaginative thinkers, including MacArthur geniuses, Pulitzer Prize winners, and Bessie Award recipients. In these broadcasts, she speaks with her neighbors and fellow artists about how the city influences their creative practice and how their work impacts the world. Shani's own portrait and quote are featured in A Choice to Change the World, a permanent installation of socially engaged artists and advocates at her alma mater, Spelman College. She holds a Master's of Art degree from the University of California, Los Angeles, and certification from the International Institute for Human Rights in Strasbourg, France. Super excited to have you here today, Shani. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and I'm going to give you the spotlight now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sis. So glad to be here with all of you, and just want to express my real appreciation for your work, Adrienne and Aimée. Listening to you talk about what you do and show your images is really filling me up, and I'm grateful to be in conversation with you today. So thanks to each one of you. So I actually began my journey as an artist working in photography. As Naomi mentioned, I've been traveling a lot. I always have two things with me, and that's my camera and my journal. And so I'm always writing, I'm always chronicling, finding ways to basically hold the people that I meet and the images that I see and the places that I've been to hold those memories sacred. And so a few years ago, I realized that I'd amassed an archive without necessarily intending to. It really was just a chronicling of my life. And so I began to use that archive of images of folks from around the world, both as a standalone photography project, but then also I began using it as source material for my collages. And so I would take, for instance, an eye from Morocco, a nose from Chile, a mouth from India, et cetera, hair from Brooklyn, and put them all together, mash them up in these sort of surrealist figures, with the idea being that I want to talk about ideas of global citizenship and about what borders mean or do not mean, and really think about how identity is constructed. So in 2018, I showed a suite of those collages in the Resignifications exhibition at the Manifesto Biennale in Palermo, Italy. And when I came back from that, I decided that I really wanted to spend all of my time working as an artist. And so in 2018, I left my 9-to-5 and decided to just kind of dig in. And when I came home, I took the second bedroom that I have and decided that that was going to become my workspace. So I started going through it and basically taking inventory of what I had in there to figure out how I was going to make it functional. And in the process of doing that, I came across this box. It was a tall, thin box, came up to maybe about my hip in the corner. I hadn't opened it in over 10 years. And I opened it on that day. And what I found inside was this scroll. So I unfurl it, and it goes from the furthest part of my apartment all the way down the hallway to the furthest part of my apartment. And on that scroll was a family tree that my grandmother had written. So my grandma, my dad's mom, was a genealogist. When she was born, she lost her mother while she was still a toddler. So at 18 months old, she no longer had her mom. She was being raised by her father and by her grandparents. And she had this kind of driving desire to know more about who her people were, because she was always asking her folks tell me about my mom. And it grew into this life-defining work. So over the course of decades, she would conduct informal and formal research about our family members. So she would literally spend hours in an archive, and she would pore over the phone book. And if she found somebody who had one of our family names, she would call them up, cold call them, and ask them to tell her who their people were, so that she could figure out if there was any kind of connection. So as she would put it, tell me who you be and where we belong. And so Grandma's work, she was also an educator, spent decades teaching in Black schools, as did my grandpa, and raising their 3 kids. And she would create charts and books out of the research that she gathered. And so one of those charts is what I found on that day in 2018. And when I found it, it was really a moment where I realized that I could feel the shift in my life happening, that this was work that I was going to ground myself in, that this is what I needed to be responding to, that I needed a different kind of lexicon artistically to be able to engage with it. And so that's when I began my practice as an abstract painter. And so my work is really about chronicling our lineage, our family history, and responding back to these charts and books that Grandma left for us. So we can go back. I'm in the 7th generation on my father's mother's side. And there were 8 generations chronicled, both, back and sideways on that chart. And then on my mother's side, my grandmother and my granny also held the same amount of history. So in their case, it was oral histories that had been passed down and preserved. But we can also go back for 7 generations on that side. And so that side of the family was all in Alabama, whereas my father's side was primarily Illinois and Tennessee. And it's just something that I'm so grateful for. It's such a gift, particularly for African Americans, where our history was never kept or intentionally lost or distorted. To be able to have access to that kind of knowing of who we are, and then also to still see the tremendous gaps in our story, all that we don't know because of the story, because of history. So anyway, that's where I situate my work. I am going to give screen sharing a shot in full transparency. When I opened up my photos beforehand, they got completely out of order. So we're gonna see whatever God wants us to see. Y'all just bear with me on this. Let me see. Okay, is that showing? Cool. So this is one of the collages that I was talking about in the beginning that rooted my work, and still does. I still do some collaging. And there are pieces in this one from a number of countries, primarily Senegal, some Cuba, and I'm using found images in addition to the ones that I've created. I'm going to try to find, here we go. So these images are from what we call family heritage tours. So on both sides of my family, we've done these tours. So the grandma that I was telling you about, the genealogist grandmother, this is her holding that chart that I found a couple of years ago. Now imagine this going for like 30 feet past the frame of this photo. So grandma eventually passed away of Alzheimer's, which was, particularly tragic given that she spent so much of her life holding our memories. But when she felt her memory start to slip, she decided that she wanted us to know who we be and where we belong. And so she and my dad got together and decided that we would do this family heritage tour. We gathered 3 generations. We took a car caravan, and she physically took us to the places that we needed to know. So that meant the gravestone of my great, 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 great grandmother, who's actually here on this chart, Cheney Streetcar Moore. We found her gravestone and took a picture of our youngest born at the time next to the oldest known ancestor. We went to the churches that we built, to the homes that we lived in, the land that we worked, etc. On this trip. But we've done similar things on my mother's side. So this is the plantation in Alabama where my grandmother was born, into sharecropping at that time. Although both of my grandmothers were raised by their grandparents, at least in part, and those grandparents were all born into enslavement. So that's how close these stories are. This is a picture of my father's hand holding some of the cotton that many generations of my family picked. This is my great, 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 great grandmother on my mother's side. And then I'm taking you down through some of the tools that grandma put together. So for instance, where you see slave master in the place of parent, that's one of the things that I'm talking about, where I'm saying, even though we can trace back 7 generations, there's still so many silences. There's still so many stories untold. And honestly, the story that's being told is a known story, and one that's common to so many of us. There was just an amazing piece in the New York Times, if y'all haven't read it yet, that starts out, I have rape-colored skin. And the sister is talking about like that legacy of slave masters raping the women on their plantation and then abandoning their children, and talking about what that legacy is. So that's also part of our story as African Americans. These are the kind of detailed records that we've kept in the backs of Bibles about our marriages and our deaths and our births. And so as I'm speaking back to that work, this is one of the pieces that I did, beginning to echo the text and the shapes that came to mind as I was thinking about, our transmission of our DNA over these generations. How we read it, what that kind of legibility or illegibility looks like. And I began putting together these pieces that really start to evoke cellular shapes that can tell our stories, our genealogies. Again, they come back to that sort of double helix feel. I take a lot of the symbolism that grandma used in the charts that she would make to depict our story. So you see that in this series, which is called Motherboard. Okay, it's getting a little out of control, which is called Motherboard. And so this is growing into a series of 7. At this point, they're about halfway done. Okay, this thing is wild, and I don't know why it keeps jumping around like that. I'm gonna just follow the instructions that I'm getting to move. So this is Motherboard. This is a longer version of that piece that's basically the same length as that scroll that I found of grandma's work. This one is called Beloved. There's been a lot of talk of Alma Thomas today, who's a tremendous influence on me and my work. And so this is after her 1976 piece, Mars Dust. This gives a sense of the texture of the work. And I think what I will do is stop my share there. I feel like I've been talking for a minute, and get into conversation with all of y'all. So thank you so much for listening and for being here, for your interest in the work.
Whew, I think I actually need a minute.
Yeah.
I feel like I cry every conversation. If you've been here, you know that it's a thing now. So it started to happen. So I think I need a second. And I also need to like somehow grasp everything that you've all just shared into a conversation that makes sense. So I think I need a second to do that. Maybe talk amongst yourselves for like 2 seconds because I've like got to get my head back on straight.
One thing that I'll add quickly, because I realized I didn't talk more about my influences beyond the amazing Alma Thomas, but there are a couple of other artists that I want to highlight. David Driscoll, who was such an extraordinary person. I was fortunate to have him as a mentor. His work is beyond description, not only in terms of his own artistic production, but in terms of the way that he cared for our legacy and for our artistic lineage. So grateful for him and his model, the example that he set. My auntie, Mary Lovelace O'Neill, who is an amazing painter and who inspires me beyond words. And Howardina Pindell, her pointillist aesthetic is something that I draw a lot of inspiration from in my own work. And of course, Bearden, as we mentioned earlier, Bearden is kind of that extraordinary figure that so many of us look to. Primarily his use of color and composition, I think, is really stunning. So just wanted to shout out those folks.
Yeah, I'm not doing any better than I was 2 minutes ago, but I want to also make sure that folks are putting any questions that they may have into the Q&A. Also, we do encourage a lively chat. You all have been doing an incredible job thus far. Also, screenshots. We love screenshots, so please take them. If the three of you would so kindly put your Instagram handles into the chat, that would be incredible so that folks can follow you. Also your websites and anything else you want people to know about. I'm gonna do my best to pull myself together because I really would like to just go cry now, but I can't. So I feel like you are all approaching abstraction from different places. Aimée, you're looking at minimalism. Adrienne, you're looking at geometric abstraction. Shani, you're doing like a bunch of different things. And I just wonder about, obviously you've told us about, well, actually, Aimée, you didn't necessarily talk to us about your like entry point exactly, but I wonder about where you are right now and what do you see yourself doing moving forward in terms of expanding on what you've been doing?
Okay, so my entry point is sort of like Shani's. I started off with photography and I moved sort of to a art form that could deliver what I was trying to investigate, that could help me investigate that more, which was more of myself. Like I was saying, in sort of like Adrienne's, my series right now is focusing on trauma. In November, I was diagnosed with PTSD. And so for me, that was a reckoning with like the memories that I'm always triggered with. And so that work is delving into these memories as snapshots. And the only way I know how to work out things is through line, texture, and color. So attacking that with that sort of voice. And so photography, I was doing sort of like painterly effects with the camera, and I was attacking the images in a painterly way. And I was like, well, let me dive into paint. And the first things I started with was oil, and oil gives me this sort of old world, you know, field. So that's when I went into Byzantine art. And as far as I see myself going forward, I want to take the voice that I have in abstract and just expound upon it. I see the evolution in my work, and I just want to keep going as that voice is going. Like I don't go into the studio with what I think I'm going to do. I just go in the studio and I paint, and I let words and what I have in my head guide me. And so I've been doing that so far, and I'm just hoping that that voice just gets more refined and refined as I keep going.
Anyone else who wants to answer can. Do you need me to reiterate the question?
Please.
Sure. So I said, what do you kind of see yourself doing moving forward? Of course, the phone will ring as I'm doing that. What do you see yourself doing moving forward within the confines or outside of the confines of what you're doing right now? Adrienne, I love these off-the-wall works, which technically are going to be installed on the wall based on what you said, but I think there's a lot of power to that not being on the wall the way it looks behind you right now. Just the photo that you shared with us was like, it did something. Shani, you're working through some motherboard series and all of this language incorporating your grandmother's work. So I just wonder about where you see yourself moving with it.
Well, one of the things that I've been doing as part of this practice is I've been interviewing all of the elders in my family about the lives they lived, who they are, what they know about the people who, those names on that chart, you know, kind of bringing them to life. And so integrating that into the work is one area where I'm going to be focusing more on. And one way that that's already happening is that I realized that when I was going back and looking over these now 220 years of genealogical records, that what was emerging for me was not just a conversation about what was, but that a lot of these issues are still very much present in what we're going through now, particularly, you know, it's in a more heightened way in terms of a mainstream vision in 2020, especially, right? So I began this project of interviewing my peers, my neighbors, and fellow artists about how they're wrestling with these ideas in their own work and what the idea of home means to them, and thinking about their own lineage and the way that their work responds to geography and place. And so I began those interviews in 2019 and collected a grip of them, probably like 15 interviews. And just this week, concluded my first season of my podcast, which is called Lineage. It's a podcast and portrait project. So it launched on February 18th of 2020, which was the birthday of Toni Morrison and Audre Lorde, and then aired bi-weekly. So would love for you all to check out that work. You can go to lineagepodcast.com. It's also available to listen for free on any place where you get your podcasts. And there are interviews with folks like Derek Adams and Stephanie Jemison, Otto Niels, Okwi and Adepero. And there's 10. Jawale was the most recent one. Jawale Willa Jozala from Urban Bushwomen. So there's Tayimba Jess. So there's a ton of interviews available for y'all to check out. And that's another way that my work is kind of expanding, going from painting to podcasting and the relationship between the two.
Shani, I love what you're doing with your family's lineage work. I mean, that is amazing. I actually have some works that aren't necessarily as in depth as yours, but that have some of those same touch points. So it was very interesting to see how like we all are in our own little worlds having these very similar conversations. And I wish that I had as much of the information that you have, because my roadblock with the work that you're doing is that, you know, I have family members who just won't tell me anything, you know, that so having the having your family be willing to give you that information is powerful. As far as my work, I'm gonna be doing these shapes behind me, but I also am still working through, you know, like picking a color and exhausting that reality. I really like that exercise for myself and my work. It challenged me to just not it challenged me to just do something different, even if it feels like it's the same. I mean, it's going to be kind of the same because I'm working in geometric abstraction, but that has so many possibilities because it doesn't have to be a square. It just is geometric. And what does that mean? It's a shape. Like I have some works that I'm actually working on a painting right now. It's like more like a landscape, but it was, I'm just abstracting my day to day and bringing it into a new space and just finding out like, what is this conversation that I want to have? What are these colors I want to explore? This year my color is brown. So I'm doing like, paintings, just pushing brown and seeing how that color interacts throughout. I think I found that a lot of painters or just within art history, like people have these periods of like, oh, I only painted blue or I only painted red. So I was like, well, what are the colors that I want to just spend time with and build compositions around? So I'm doing that with browns. And just, those paintings I will say are a little more like planned out. But as I'm exercising these plans, I still am exercising just the spontaneity of being a painter and coming in here and exploring different techniques and things of that nature. Like I don't like painting figuratively because I just feel like after seeing the trajectory of that being the pivot of so many Black artists having to make that move, having to, that the work required to suppress something that you really want to explore because you want to be successful in something and the market is dictating that you have to do this. I don't want to do that. And so I'm gonna keep doing, these shapes and having fun with them. But yeah, I still, I have a painting of my cat right now that I'm working on. It brings me joy. But am I gonna have a whole show about that? I don't know, maybe. But
you can do whatever you want.
Exactly. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, I
shapes,
yeah, it's very reduced. But it's just not my norm. As far as what I am putting out into the world. So I'm just gonna keep going.
You kind of gave me a great segue because the question that I wanted to ask next was around color and just each of your engagements with color. And I mean, like you sadly answered most of my question, Adrienne, but Aimée and Shani, I would love to hear from you about just how you're working through selecting colors and then pushing those colors forward within your work.
Well, for me, the color palette that I'm using in the paintings all comes back to Grandma's charts. So I'm using the colors that she used. One thing you couldn't see in that image that I showed of her holding the chart is that after she took that, she took a ribbon from Grandma Cheney and she kind of strung it down the chart. Actually, when I opened it, I thought ribbon had just gotten stuck inside there. And then I realized what she'd done. So it was taped underneath her name and then it went all the way down until you got to Grandma and Grandpa's names. They were married for over 50 years. And so then it goes from their names to their 3 children's names and their spouses. My parents actually just celebrated 50 years themselves 2 weeks ago. And so the ribbon goes to there. So happy anniversary, Mama and Daddy. I think you're watching. Love y'all. And then it goes to the 7 grandkids from there. So it's like a there's a bunch of different colored ribbons that she used to draw that distinct line, tracing our specific lineage inside of this larger chart. And so that color palette is what I use in my own work.
For myself, I grew up in New Orleans, and I don't know if anyone's ever in the chat has been to New Orleans, but New Orleans is vibrant. Like the colors, everything's saturated in color. The houses, habits, the way we dress, our clothes, the way we talk, the way we communicate with each other. So in the series that I'm working in now, like I said, when I envision these paintings, they're always in my head first. And when I think of memory states, they're always in blue for some reason. And so when I created these pieces, I wanted them to be in these ranges of blue. And when I think of a situation that triggers someone or triggers me, it's this like exciting red color. And so that's why I'm using the two in that way. But I do have a series called Seeing Red, and it plays on the variations of how we interpret red. Like, is it anger? Is it love? Is it passion? So sometimes I take the colors and I flip them on the heads of what we've been told color is. So yeah, I just literally, I sit with the ideas and the colors come to me, and then I'm like, okay. And I saturate my canvases like this one behind me, because that's kind of how I see the paintings. I just see them in color form first. So I just go from there.
Amazing. Let's have a look at some of the questions. Actually, I have a question for you specifically, Aimée. I'm also feeling like I'm ruining your name. Am I?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Call me Amy, we good.
Huh?
As long as you don't call me Amy, we are good.
Oh dear, okay. So I wonder about the choice to paint on the birch.
Okay.
And then, wait. But also specifically to allow the wood grain to like speak for itself and actually be a part of the work.
Yeah. So the work is always about silences. And as a woman, and especially a Black woman, we're not allowed to speak, or when we do speak, we're seen as angry or aggressive or in that way. So we're silenced in giving our true opinion or emotions. And in regards to the wood, I was working in canvas, like most painters start off with canvas, and I wasn't able to saturate the support like I wanted to. And so I went through all of this research of like, how could I get this color true to actually what the color is that I'm making? Because my colors I make on my own. They all start off in powder form, and I make them all. So there's like an apothecary of colors just around my house. And I realized that wood takes on the same saturation effects that cloth does, but I didn't want to paint on cloth. So I wanted to paint on wood, which goes back to like that Byzantine art, which is usually on wood. And so when I realized the wood would soak up the colors like cotton does, but it has a better archival sense to it, that's when I went to wood. And then with the wood grain, I could gesso over that, but that would take away the effect of soaking up the color. And it would also silence the kind of speaking that the wood has done, because these grains in the wood is also its life force when it was alive and all of these things. So I didn't want to suppress that. So I love that it's also another element that's added to the paintings.
Awesome, thank you. All right. Questions from the audience. Again, everyone, if you have a look at the bottom of your screen, towards the left, you should see a Q&A little bit, and you can add any questions that you may have there. Jennifer, feel free to add whatever you've raised your hand to say into the Q&A. Question from Eric Guzman. Everyone, do you feel your practice is spiritual, or the act of painting is spiritual in nature?
100%. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that, like, when I'm in that zone, I definitely feel a channeling happening, particularly because I'm working on a project about my ancestors. And so I often refer to it as a collaboration between me and them. So this is our work.
Yeah, I would say spirit, but it's already there. Yeah, I would say that painting is a spiritual practice and act. I find myself coming here a lot to fill myself up. I find myself painting to fill myself. So I would say they definitely are married.
For me, it's the same. When I was diagnosed with PTSD, it took me a while to shake back from that. And, you know, therapy is amazing, and that's obviously how I found out. But also, my way of making sense of the world is painting, and my way of making sense of things I don't understand is painting. And so, this series is very difficult for me to do. I started one piece in November, and I'm still working on the pieces that I'm going to showcase in 2 weeks right now. And that's difficult. That's hard for me because I normally go to pieces and I can work through them, but I find myself like sitting at the piece and I just look at it and I know what I want to do, but I'll put it off and do something else because it's this work that I know I need to do. So it is spiritual and it is very reflective. That's why a lot of the pieces, like this title, this is called Paying Reverence to the Altar of Memories, because it is this spiritual, cathartic thing that I'm doing, that I'm paying reverence and giving myself the time that I don't think as a Black woman that I'm normally given in the world to just sit with things and untangle them and figure out how to put things in place so I can be better for myself and then I can show up better for other people. So it is my time to be spiritual. It's my time to pay reverence to myself. So yeah.
If I may just add to that for a moment, I try to like keep my own speaking time on these very minimal. But what you just said resonated. Like I find that I might be in the midst of writing something or like something that like I should have been finished with. And then something happens that speaks to the work that I'm about to do. So I don't think you should kind of limit your scope about time in that way in terms of thinking about yourself as procrastinating. Like you're kind of being fed what you need to be fed to do what you need to do. And I think that's a kind of more gracious way to think about yourself in the work.
Yeah. In this series, I've realized that I have not been giving myself grace because I've been giving myself, expecting myself to do what I've been doing on other series, which it dug deep, but this is digging way deeper. And there's that, I think that's that part of that, one of my effects of PTSD is I make myself very like, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And I'm fighting against that. And I think that's what I'm wrestling with in these pieces is going against that framework that I've built to protect myself. And this is hard. Like it's hard. And I hope you guys enjoy the pieces when you see it because they are hard. Like they're haunting. And sometimes I just turn around the canvas when I'm not working on them because I don't want to look at it. So yeah. So I appreciate you telling me that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just here to do what I'm supposed to do. Okay, next question from Lisa Martin. Do you feel like curators understand Black female abstraction and can curate it properly? It's like, no, they don't. They don't get it. They don't get it. That's hilarious. Want to elaborate at all?
Okay, yeah, I'll go. I don't think they get it. I don't know about anyone else, but I often get, oh, this is great. Can you like add some figures in it? And it's like, well, no, these pieces, speaking for myself, they're meditative, contemplative pieces where I want you to look at the pieces and understand. Because if I was a white man making these things, you would just take it as what it's worth and you wouldn't question why I'm making it. You would just take it and say, oh, okay, this is abstract. But I can't be abstract in an intellectual realm. I can't be abstract in an emotional realm because as a Black person, we're not afforded to have that sort of intelligence. Obviously, you can tell I'm getting upset because I run into this wall all the time and it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. I've shown up to galleries with my work and they assume I'm the one dropping it off, that I'm not the artist. So it's very frustrating.
Yeah, you're not alone in those experiences at all. When I first started painting abstractions, I was dressed in Black, because that's what I thought artists should show up and wear for their openings. And because I had on Black, it was also assumed that I was serving drinks, but they were looking for me for my work. And I was like, oh, I'm on the right path if this is what we're doing here, because this becomes a social experiment of who you think should be doing this. And it's me. So hello. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I want to say that some curators are ready and want to be, you know, like allies, I guess, to Black women abstractionists. But I don't think that people have even imagined us in that space to hold the work that we have been doing. And I mean, I'm saying that for, you know, the predominantly white art world, but I'm also speaking for Black curators as well. I don't think that they're comfortable, you know, letting abstraction touch their feet, so to speak, right now, because I don't think they want to deal with the rigor of us producing something so simple, but yet very complex. And I don't know. I don't know how we would resolve that, but I'm also not, I guess I don't really have very high expectations because I've already seen historically how we have been muted.
We just keep making, that's what happens. We just keep making.
Yeah, we just keep making, and then like, I mean, honestly, you know, I'm more like keep my day job, because if I'm waiting on them to value me, I'm gonna be waiting a long time. And then what, you know, what am I gonna, you know, neglect my health to participate in this violent game? No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna take care of myself. And when y'all catch up, I'll be there. But
right.
The other way around, I can't wait on them.
One thing I'll just briefly add into this is, you know, this problem of understanding Black women abstractionists is not new. You know, I mentioned earlier Mary Lovelace O'Neill, and she's talked about when her work was first, because I come from a movement family. And so inside the context of movement, there was a sort of hyper emphasis on figurative work, which is where Mary said she got her idea to just paint in a specific shade of Black that she does, because she was like, I'm still talking about something here. It doesn't have to be figurative. It doesn't have to be didactic in terms of its representation. I'm still telling this particular story. But she had to fight, you know, over the course of decades to be able to have that work recognized as it should be. And, you know, that's a fight that continues. So, you know, this, these dynamics vastly precede any of us, you know, and part of a continuum that we have to continuously work to shift.
Thank you all for these brilliant responses.
I also think though, Naima, in a way, you curators like yourself are changing that for us. And we appreciate that 100%. We appreciate being here. Yeah, having this conversation with, you know, Adrienne and Shani. Like, I'm happy to now be connected to knowing your guys' story in a way, because now I can say, oh, there's 2 more on this list. Let me give their names, you know?
Yes.
Honestly, like I said, I just feel like for context of like, I've already given context for those who weren't here. This conversation was like one of the first. Amazing, I love it. Anyway, this conversation was one of the first that I wanted to do for 4-4, because I feel like, again, like I asked somebody and they couldn't give me like 5 women who were alive making work right now. And I just was like, what? No. So part of this for me is about giving voice a platform to speak for itself, because it's not about what I think about the work. It's about what you think about what you're doing. It's about what you think about the act of painting. It's about what you think about line and curve and color. That's it. And in general, in terms of my practice as a curator, I just want Black people to see themselves. That's it. Which, you know, actually is maybe a tall order, sadly, in this space. And it's not just one type of Blackness. Like, we've had people on this series who are based in Ethiopia, who are based, whose family are from the Caribbean. Like, it's just meant to really be an engagement with the Black self in totality. And I am really lucky to be able to do that. And I feel, I might cry again. I feel like I'm blessed to have you all tell me yes when I ask. So thank you again. So another question from Q&A. Damien Sowell, who I've known since I was 11 years old, has asked the question. How do you feel the next generation can be developed or supported in the arts, specifically within abstract media? What advice would you give them? Resources available, etc.
I feel like this is a little bit hard. This is a hard question. I would say, like, for the next generation, we need to start building those. We need to start building those spaces for them to thrive. And now is how do we build those? How do we build our own spaces? And do they even have to be in the U.S.? You know, where are those spaces? How do we build those spaces? Because even right now, like, I'm in a studio space and it's nice and it's got the, you know, sans serif gentrified text, but you know, I need more, you know, and I want to be able to have this space open for the kids around the way to be able to come in and learn, or, you know, have a safe space. And it's kind of like, if this was mine and I had those resources, that would exist. But we got to make our own stuff. I mean, I know that takes a lot. But, yeah, my advice would be to just do, if you're gonna do this work, do it without the expectation of getting the credit, maybe. Just do it because you want to. Do it to feel yourself. Do it because it is what gives you purpose. If it's not for that, then don't do it, because it's gonna hurt you and you're gonna hurt yourself.
Yeah.
I think children understand abstraction on a very intuitive level, you know? So I think the main thing I would say is don't teach them away from themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Work to get it, right? So helping them lean into it, letting them know the history, you know, sharing conversations like this, for instance, and going back into that lineage of people who've been doing this work over the course of centuries, and just talking to them about, you know, you do see yourselves here, and to stay rooted in that.
I'm just gonna piggyback off that, Shani, because that's very important what you said. I would teach public art, and we would start with shapes, because a lot of kids were like, oh, I'm not an artist, or, you know, I can't draw a hand. And it's like, no, don't worry about not drawing a hand. Like, shapes are the most accessible thing that we have. Yep. So you're right, like, giving them the tools to say, hey, you can build whatever you want with this is also important.
Yep.
Yeah, I do the same. I have 4 nephews and I do the same thing with them. And it's very helpful. They come to my shows and my sister tells me, they paint on the walls, which they shouldn't do, but they paint on the walls and they say, this is like Aimée. I'm painting like Aimée. And so to allow them to see that they're able to do it, I think is the first thing. And what I always tell kids when I'm helping them is that no matter what you think of it or what someone else thinks of it, this is something you created that never existed. And there's power in that, because before you painted whatever this is, it never existed. And so I think keeping that along as you create is something important, because like Adrienne said, if you're doing this and searching for accolades, you're going to hurt yourself. So just make and create, and, you know, do what's true and honest to you. But it does also go back to, I think, the question that we have about as a Black community period is that we have to have our own spaces. We have to have our own spaces to facilitate these conversations with kids, to be able to foster those thoughts and those freedoms. So yeah, I think that it's very important to not teach them away from themselves, teach them that whatever you create was never created before you did it. So there's power in that. And then to have the spaces that protect them and their thoughts.
Amazing. Okay, that was done. Question specifically for you, Shani, from Eric Guzman. Have you thought of ways to incorporate your photography into your newer work? Or do you feel photo is now your tool to inform the research?
Both. Like I was saying earlier about Lineage, it's a podcast and a portrait project. So I've been making portraits of everybody that I interview. And so photography is very much still a core part of my practice. I'm not sure, maybe he's asking about ways to integrate the photography and the abstract painting, perhaps, which I would see like within the same exhibition, but not necessarily within the same piece. Although, you know, who knows? See where the muse takes me.
Nice. Adrienne and Aimée, the use of line in both your work makes me think about your actual hand and body while creating. I would love to hear more from all three of you about just how you're physically engaged while creating. And this question is from Jennifer Olidapo. Welcome back, Jennifer. So that question is for everybody. You need it again?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah?
Now you go.
Okay.
So for me with the line, it depends on the size of it. So how I'm working in that space. Like the piece behind me is about 4 feet. So that one took more actual physical restraint because I had to use my body going across in that way. But it is, I guess I never really think about it. I stand up most of the time when I create, and afterwards my feet are swollen. So I guess that's pain and love in the pieces. I mean, I stand up for somebody else's job for 8 hours, so why can't I stand up for myself in pain, right? So yeah, I think the physicality in it is once again this therapeutic thing of I'm using my body and my labor for myself instead of someone else. And I think I have this conversation all the time that there's ancestors that live in me. And so I think that is another way to relieve that memory that I have from someone else of that physical labor for someone else, that I'm now reclaiming it for myself in that way. So yeah. Adrienne.
Okay. I would just say, you know, I don't know how everybody works, but for how I work, it's very physical. Like it's super physical. Sometimes my back be hurting. Sometimes my shoulder be on fire. You know, I'm expecting to have arthritis at this point because it's just like a lot of repetition, you know? So yeah, like baths are necessary. But yeah, I would say I'm very physically engaged. I also like kind of paint on the table. I don't really put my work up on like the wall or use an easel. So I'm generally like standing on top, you know, atop the work and painting. So it's involved.
I agree. It can be, and so one of the things that I think about in particular is how to take care of my hands, you know, because it is very physically engaging work, you know. So between typing and painting all day, like, I feel like my hands are kind of in constant motion, and I'm aware that I can feel the stress in my body because, you know, we house it in our bodies. So, you know, making sure that my shoulders aren't up by my ears, you know, making sure that I'm doing, you know, stretches like this to help, you know, keep the blood flowing. I've been taking this really amazing yoga class online with Amy Meredith Cox called Embodied Poetics that is giving me my whole life. She's incorporating, yesterday we did a poem by Lucille Clifton, and it's a group of Black women moving our bodies in response to that poem that Speaking In was written for us as well. So, you know, you got to find your ways to institute self-care in the midst of the work, which is, and the work is its own form of self-care, right? But how do you care for yourself in the midst of it too?
Yeah, I recently did a piece for the Cultural Museum here, the George Washington Carver Museum, and they did a piece on from slavery to now on blacks in Texas. And I was commissioned to do a slave ship. And so we did these planks. The thing is, it's 10 feet by 5 feet. Well, my studio's in my apartment, so it's my entire living room had to be just emptied out. And I'm on the floor for 2 months over this slave ship that's all in planks. So it's like 45 planks that I paint separately. And afterwards, I realized like I had to go to the chiropractor. Like my back was like out of whack. My knee was hurting because I was on the floor 8 hours a day, you know. And that was the most I spent on a piece, because it's like at least 30 feet that were gilded on the piece. So it was all this labor into it. And that's when I realized, like Shani was saying, like, I need to go to yoga. Like, I need to take care of myself to continue to keep making this work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I sometimes feel like, you know, painting can be like exercising. Like sometimes I'm gung-ho to be like, yeah, you know, and then other times I don't really want to do it so much because of what it requires in my body. And I think I just try to incorporate, or at least allow myself to rest, because sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm this far in this painting and I should go back and finish it up, or, you know, work on it. But it's like, you've exhausted, 8 hours already into it, you know, like you are allowed to rest. You deserve rest, and you deserve to take a break from the work. It doesn't mean that it's stopping because you're taking a break.
Awesome. Thank you all for these thoughtful responses. It really is making an already robust conversation even more satisfying. We have one more question from Ajamu Kojo. What's up, Ajamu? Who are your top 5 influences outside of painters? It could be any genre of art making, is what I'm understanding. Tell me in the chat if that's right. He hasn't responded, so I feel like that's right. Go ahead. Yeah, he said yes. So any genre, whether it's music, what have you.
I'll start. I like people who live the fullness of their lives, you know. So Renaissance men and women, Maya Angelou, you know, she's somebody who did so much with her years. Gordon Parks is another one. Paul Robeson, Catherine Dunham. I'm gonna go with more than 5 because I can't stop in my head. So like Zora, I look to Carrie Mae Weems, to Susan L. Taylor, to Ruby Dee. Let me stop. I'm about to go off on a rant. Sonia Sanchez.
I feel like I could appreciate a rant. So
Like if I get started, I'm gonna keep.
You keep dropping names. Maybe it's people we never thought of, and we could follow too. So rants are fine. I'm fine.
Yeah, do it. Go.
Okay, well, so Hakeem Adabuti. Just thinking about National Black Arts Movement poets in particular. So Sonia, Nikki, Mari Evans, Haki, Amiri, etc. My uncle John O'Neill is a tremendous influence on me. He was a playwright and an organizer. He used his work in service of the movement, moved down south to work with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee right out of college, and dedicated the rest of his life to doing what was referred to as a cultural armistice, which was an organization called the Free Southern Theater. Which would tour the rural South and do plays about the themes of the movement, race and justice, etc. Class politics. So he's a tremendous influence on my work. So for me, it's not just Octavia Butler right now. I just got one of her books in the mail today, revisiting the parable of the sower, which is speaking so much to what we're going through right now. So for me, it's writers, it's anthropologists, it's dancers and choreographers, it's painters, it's, you know, Black folks who've given themselves over to doing work that advances our culture and also advances our community.
Amazing. Either of you?
I'll go. Toni Morrison is a big influence on me. Zora Neale Hurston. I actually had a dream about Toni Morrison, very strange, like right after she passed away. And we were like having this dialogue and I was like, but I have to do this. And she was like, but none of that's for you to carry. So she like holds a special place in my heart. So yeah, Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, who else could I say? My grandmother, who holds a special place in my heart because she, you know, whatever she thought was right, she would stand up for. There was a story, I won't bore y'all with it, but she went to school to beat up a nun because she thought the nun was treating my mother wrong. So just seeing like a Black woman stand like that to be like, I don't care, like in deep, you know, Ninth Ward, New Orleans, being like, I don't care, I'm standing up for whatever I want to stand up for. The young women who segregated in New Orleans, one of them is my cousin. Young, being told the story, and the story was so heavy for me to handle, I couldn't handle at that time. And so as I got older, I understood like what her parents and her family went through to think about letting her integrate into schools in the 60s in New Orleans. And then I go to music. I listen to a lot of Miles Davis, Nina Simone. Right now, Octavia Butler. I listen to a lot of poetry from all genres because poetry in itself is to me like these little snippets, these little paintings. They're painting these pictures, but not giving you the full picture. So I look to all of that. I look to the food that we cook, even home, as inspiration of pulling together resources to make nourishment. So yeah.
I would say just as of right now, because, you know, influences are, I think it's just ebbs and flows of that. My inspiration or influences have been from Audre Lorde, Zora Neale Hurston, Blood Orange, Frank Ocean, and Dionne Warwick, Minnie Riperton. Just going there, I think it's been a lot of music for me. And then I've just been listening to podcasts. So like The Read is one that is just real great and fun. It just bring me some joy. I just recently listened to Bag Ladies. I love them. They are hilarious. So yeah, it's just I guess like picking up from culture. And that's pretty constant.
Wonderful. How you all feeling on time? It's 2:38. Feeling okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Sweet. So this question is for you, Aimée. And I mean, this is actually a question that everyone can answer, I feel like. Your thoughts on scale. So the question that was posed was by Shanika Svetvilas. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that. Is the current scale of your work, Aimée, meant to be intimate? Because they all seem relatively on the smaller side, or kind of medium size, I guess, really.
If I may, you keep saying Amy, if I may.
Damn it, I'm sorry.
No, it's also, so since I don't paint in a traditional form of a square, all of my pieces, I either cut them myself or I get them cut. So it's also sourcing materials, and it's also out of where my production is. I have some 30-inch squares and I have some 4 or 5-inch circles, I'm sorry. But also the circle takes up a different space than the square does. So it's hard to store and it's hard to maneuver. So I would love to create large, but also like Adrienne's saying, I don't want to create things that there's not a market for. And that I'm just making these pieces and they just exist like around my house. But I would love to create large. I think being larger would make it even more intimate because then you're swallowed into this scene and you don't see anything else outside of that. So right now the work is just dependent upon the space that I have. So like, I'm like a crab, right? I just live in the space that I have. And then when I find a better space, I'll make bigger, pieces. But no, it's just dependent upon where I am now.
I kind of have a question for both Shani and Aimée, which is like, you guys are doing this very personal work. Shani with your family lineage, and Aimée with you like exploring your PTSD. And so you guys are producing these works, and I want to know from both of you, like, how are you processing this work being like available, collected, the stewardship of it? How are you guys thinking about who can purchase or collect or be in stewardship of your work because it's so personal? Like, how do you, like, what are the things that you're thinking about in terms of that?
So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Deborah Roberts. She's also based out of Boston, and she wrote an article, and I have it like pinned to my Instagram. It's like, I'm in control of who collects this work, and I can say no. And your other point, Adrienne, I have a day job. So I don't need the bills to literally pay all of, the art sales pay all of my bills. So I've given myself that power to be like, who wants to buy it? No, I don't want them to collect it, right? Especially with the work that I'm working on now, where they're all images of me that I've taken of myself at certain points in my life. And so I want to make sure that the work that I am putting out, like, I can't control how the work is digested and interpreted, but I can control who hangs it in their house, and I can control how it's shown in a gallery sense. Because I actually just pulled out of a gallery for a group show that we had coming up in a few weeks. That's why the show is by myself now, is because I pulled out of the group show because I wasn't comfortable. And so I've given myself that license to do that. So I am aware of how personal the work is. And yeah, that's always a constant thought in my mind of like, who's collecting this work, who's respecting this work, especially when you have some semblances of a Black woman in the work. You also want to be very aware of that, because how the Black body has been portrayed is, we can see how that's played out.
Right before our talk today, I was watching another artist talk with Vanessa German and Allison Czar. And they were talking about how, like, when a work is in need of repair, once it's in a collector's space, that it's like visiting one of your children, getting to comb their hair again, And I love that. I think that was you, Adrienne, in the beginning, who was saying that you feel like your work is, it's your own, it's like a baby, right? It's like your own, something that you created. And so, I think that's something that we all live with as artists, that kind of tension between giving your whole self to making a thing and then having to watch it walk away, right? There was a conversation I had with Sonia Sanchez probably 20 years ago, where she was talking about with poems, once you create it, it's no longer yours, Because at the time I was really wrestling with the idea of, I wrote this and I meant it to say this. And this person is reading it and they're hearing that. That ain't what I said, And her whole point was that, people come to poems and, I think it can be easily transposed to paintings or whatever piece of art. People are coming to whatever work they're engaging with their own set of ideas and assumptions and principles and experiences that inform their interaction with whatever that thing is. And that's something that not only do we have no control over, but it's a complete and thorough waste of time to try to have any kind of control over that, right? Not our role in the world. And so it's a balance, I think, between what you were just saying, Aimée, about wanting to curate your collectors in a way. And also being aware that once you put the work out in the world, it's no longer yours. Because even if you pick who gets it first, once it gets on the secondary market, you don't have a say in that.
Right. Right.
Well, actually,
you
can.
Say more.
You can, like I said before, you literally can do anything you want. You can write it into a contract that you get to decide with that seller who is going to buy it from them. And I think this is your father, right? Wendell O'Neill? He said The same is true for children. Once they grow up, they are no longer yours. I feel like Shani probably disagrees with you a little bit. What'd you say?
I said, I'm always yours.
Oh, that's
I mean, it's true. I mean, people go up and they assume their own lives, you know, and you do your best during the formative years that you have to pour into them in the ways that you can and equip them as best you can. But at a certain point,
Yeah.
prosper.
They are their own person with a whole journey of their own ahead of them. And I think that's a good place to rest. I don't know if any of you, yep, exactly. I like to bring Hilma up a lot. Maria Lino has said, remember that Hilma af Klint put in her will that her work would be in storage for 20 years so others would catch up to it.
Wow.
This is maybe the second or third time Hilma af Klint's work has come up in this series.
Right. And, you know, when we get off this call, let me get to writing my will so I can.
Look, I'm here for it. Estate planning is where it's at, okay? That's the real wave to catch, okay? So thank you all so much for this afternoon. This has been an incredible, rich conversation, and I'm so grateful to each of you for being willing to join it. I don't know if any of you have anything else you'd like to add. Floor is yours if you decide you want to do so.
Just a thank you. I want to thank everybody for giving their time. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for being interested in our work. Hopefully you go forth with more knowledge of abstraction and the Black women in abstraction and why we're creating. But thank you for giving us this floor, or me specifically. Thank you.
I'm appreciative of this time together and want to say thank you to each one of you, and also the entire 4-4 series. Kudos to you for carving out your space and for giving a platform for all of us. We really are grateful. In terms of next steps for people who want to support the work, please follow on Instagram. I'm at Shani Jamila. The podcast is at Lineage Podcast. And something that would be super helpful right now is, now that the first season has been completed as of this week, if you go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe and rate and review, it makes a huge difference in being able to get the word out to other people about the work, and literally takes 2 minutes. So if you wouldn't mind going to Apple Podcasts and just writing a few words about the work and why it's important, that would be amazing. So thanks to each one of you. I really feel fed by our conversation today, and I'm grateful to be in community with all of you.
On to the podcast now.
Thank you.
Adrienne, you good?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very appreciative of this. I'm so happy to know now Aimée and Shani. This has been great. Yeah, I'm full and I'm happy and I'm grateful. Thank you, Naima. Yeah, thanks.
Well, yay. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. It's almost 3 o'clock if you're on the East Coast, so you still have the whole rest of the afternoon ahead of you. Enjoy the day. Thank you again to all of our incredibly talented and brilliant panelists, and of course to you, because you're here and you spend so much time with us and engage with us. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.